can talk for an hour.
Well, I see my good friend Wayne's here from the Democrat D-triple-C, i.e. Sac Space, and they like to tape me because they like to try to catch me in something, I guess. But anyways, appreciate the invitation to come speak tonight. Just a quick little background. My wife's with me. She's sitting back there in the back. So raise your hand, Jody. We've been married, I guess, 34 years, I'm pretty sure. And live up in Holmes County for 35 years. My background is I'm a farmer, but I actually grew up in the city. And I got involved in agriculture, and I used to raise a bunch of hogs, so I'm pretty much just a hog farmer. I don't know if you know much about hog farmers, but we're pretty much common sense, down-to-earth people, and hogs are a commodity, so I have the school of hard knocks education on supply and demand and how the free market system works. And I've been self-employed since 1978, and I think that's important. I think we have too many people in Congress and some in the legislature, for that matter, that have never ran a business, or some in Congress have never had a real job, and I think that's important. So I like to say I've written on both sides of a paycheck. You know, I've made the mortgage, made the payroll, and dealt with the challenges of government regulations and costs associated to do business here in Ohio. I decided I'm running for this spot because I'm really concerned about the future of this country. You know, as we like to say, we just can't spend and bar ourselves to prosperity. And you know, I'm going to try to put this bring it around full circle, how the deficit spending relates to several things. But this massive deficit spending we got at the federal level, it's really a national security issue now because it's getting so big for a couple of reasons. One, we're borrowing money from China. I don't believe that's healthy. I think you know, when you deal with bankers, you know, when you're really in deep to the bank, they can pull a lot of strings, and it's just not healthy for China to be a source of our funds. Number two, you think about it, you know, with these massive deficits, and now we've got $13 trillion of debt and growing better than $1 trillion a year, close to $2 trillion a year. As far as the eye can see, that means that there's less money. Well, it means that more of the money that comes into the federal government has to go to service the debt, interest payments, a lot to China. And so that means there's less spending, what I call discretionary spending. And when you kind of think about it, defense is discretionary spending. You know, if we need to put a missile system in to protect ourselves, and we don't have the money or enough money to do the job right, it probably won't happen. And you know, or else we'll have to do certain things at the federal level. And to put that kind of perspective, how did the Cold War end? How did how was the Soviet Union brought down? Well, we didn't fire a shot to do it. We bankrupted them. And unfortunately and ironically, we're bankrupting ourselves.
Exactly.
And so that's why it's really a national security issue and how it goes back. Now, it also goes back to it erodes our liberties, our freedoms, our God-given constitutional freedoms. And how I mean by that is, when you have bigger and bigger and more intrusive government, okay, that erodes our freedoms because, and it goes back to the deficit again, and a weak economy, a poor economy, a stagnant economy, meaning that when people aren't financially secure, you know, of some certainty and that they're going to have a job and that they're going to be able to keep their job, or if your business is going to be able to survive, you know, it's just something that security, it erodes our freedoms because if we're not financially secure, then we're having more and more government, more and more people are dependent on government, and that's an erosion of our freedom. So you can see how I bring this all back around to the issue about the deficit, why the deficit is such a problem, because economics drives this whole thing. It drives our national security, it drives our standard of living, our quality of life for us and our kids and their kids and their kids, and then it also drives the ability to be a free people that our founding fathers, you know, founded this country on. And so we just absolutely have to attack this deficit spending and get this economy going. Now, here's the problem. Everything they're doing in Washington, D.C., I can't think of one thing they're doing right that helps, I like some of the chuckles there, bring confidence to the private sector. I meet with business people every day. I know Senator Jimmy Stewart does too, and he's hearing the same thing I'm hearing. People are scared to death of the future, and employers are less willing to invest in their businesses and grow their businesses and hire people and create jobs, and that's the only way we get out of this predicament. And you know, they talk a lot about wealth redistribution.
Yeah.
Well, you know, that's a bunch of nonsense, but I guess you can redistribute it at some point, then there's not gonna be anything to redistribute. But what we need, this election is about wealth redistribution versus wealth creation. And we need wealth creation. And what wealth creation is when you add value to something, that's something people need and use, and improves our standard of living and our quality of life. And there's really only three ways you have wealth creation. One is you develop our natural resources, which God blessed this country with a lot of natural resources that we can responsibly get at and use, and then that's, of course, that's mine for it or drill for it. Another way is you grow it or raise it, agriculture, and the other way is you make it, manufacturing. That's those three general areas are wealth creation and wealth creators. Now, the problem I see it, everything Washington D.C. is doing is putting barriers to inhibit wealth creation. You know, we got the barriers of all this massive deficit spending again, where it's creating huge uncertainty in the economy and what's going to happen. What's interest rates? What's going to happen to interest rates? I can remember back in the misery years, the late '70s, where you had 20% plus prime rate, and you know, if that comes back, I don't care what business you got. If you got any debt, you're going to have trouble staying in business at 20% plus. The numbers just don't work. The uncertainty about, you know, our Congressman Space and the rest of his colleagues voted in the U.S. House to cap and trade national energy tax, which artificially raised the price of energy. And if we're going to have a strong, vibrant economy, we need an energy supply that's affordable and reliable. If we don't have that, we're going to be struggling. And cap and trade does not create that. Does not create that. So you got the uncertainty. Now we have uncertainty of the so-called health care. I've talked to employers that I just put hiring on hold because they don't know what's coming out in all the regulations. And as of last week, I've been told there's been 4,100 pages wrote for the regulations on the health care. And there's all kinds of things coming out there. You've heard about the 1099s. If you're in business and you do over $600 a year with another business, you have to send a 1099. Even the certified public accountants are against that because it just adds more burdensome cost to do business in this country, and it's just just ridiculous. So we have to get that certainty. We have to give certainty to the private sector, and so they have the confidence. And there's really, in my opinion, this is how you do it. Number one, we've got to get the deficit spending under control. And how do we do that? Just off the bat, what we got to do when we take over and take our office in new Congress in January is that what I call the domestic discretionary spending. That's not the entitlements, that's not Social Security, it's not Medicare or Medicaid, it's not defense, it's everything else they spend the money here. The reason I want to attack that first is because this past fiscal year, that's grown almost 15%, and the year before that, about 11%. And that's what, 25, 26% in the last 2 years. So we ought to roll that back to fiscal year 08 levels just as a start. And even fiscal year 08 levels were pretty high, but that's a start. And then number two, we got to roll back the massive tax increases. There's been lots of tax increases, and unfortunately, Congress last week went home and didn't address the expiration of the Bush tax policy cuts policy here on December 31st. So come January 1st, we are looking at nearly a $4 trillion tax increase over 10 years, or $200 billion this first year. Income taxes are going to go up. The death tax, estate tax, goes back to 01 levels where it's $1 million exemption, a 55% tax rate. And I got news for you. $1 million isn't that much anymore. If you own your own house and saved a little bit, you're going to be there. And the government's going to take 55% of it, over $1 million. Okay. Capital gains rates going up 15 to 20%. Some people will go to 23%. That's a killer for. We ought to be lowering the capital gains, because with the lower capital gains, it encourages economic activity and transactions and business, and creates revenue. The marriage penalty does come back. The child credit, $1,000 down to $500. I don't have the list in front of me, but you can see what's happened in January 1st, and Congress. I think the leadership in Congress, on the Democrats, of course, the leadership and control, they sent a clear signal because supposedly they had the votes to extend, not to increase any taxes January 1st, and they went home instead because they didn't want to have that vote. They want to come back and do something after the election, which was probably just be playing around the edges a little bit, not do what they really need to do. So that ought to tell you something right there of what's up. And the third thing, we gotta get the bureaucracies and government under control, and in the regulatory area. You know, we're chasing jobs out of this country because we have such a burdensome regulatory policy in a lot of areas. And there's one, I was speaking to a Chamber of Commerce today, and they had an issue that came up, and I heard about last week, but the PUCO, the Public Utilities Commission here in Ohio, just put some new rules in so they could be in compliance with the federal law, that if you are in business and you have a trucks, say about a ton, or anything over 10,000 gross vehicle weight GVW, you start January 1st, you have a whole new set of regulations that are pretty close to what a semi-truck operation has to have. That is very burdensome, very costly, and unnecessary. That's just another example of the federal government's heavy hand out the state says you will do this or we're going to cut this money for you. You know, it's just more blackmail from the federal government to the states. As an example, so we get that, we restore that confidence. And the good news that I see, there's a lot of pent-up demand out here. There's a lot of businesses that are ready to, that want to invest in their businesses and grow their businesses and hire people and get this economy going. And it's from the small to the very large. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal here, probably about 6-7 weeks ago now, that said the top 500 businesses in the United States, non-financial businesses, are sitting on $2 trillion of cash. And they're just waiting and seeing. They don't want to invest in their businesses and get things going. And that's really how we get out of this mess. And we don't pass a national energy tax, cap and trade. We repeal Obamacare, health care. That is going to add to the deficit. You know, it's interesting.